I had recently moved back in with my parents after my last breakup, and honestly, it was the last place I wanted to be. My ex and I had rushed into things, signed a lease together in Boston, and within months, the whole relationship crumbled. One small piece of advice I'll never forget from that mess: never sign a lease with someone you've only just gotten serious with. You don't really know someone until you're living with them day after day. The breakup left me with no choice but to leave, and since I couldn't immediately afford another place, I ended up back at my parents' home in western Massachusetts. If you've ever been to Massachusetts, you know that the further west you go, the more rural and quiet it gets. I was never a country girl. I liked the noise of the city, the convenience of having something open at all hours, and the comfort of being surrounded by people. Out here, it's dead quiet most of the time, and the biggest excitement is the occasional tractor rolling by on the back roads. It's suffocating, but I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until I could get my own apartment again. Since I needed an income, I went back to my old job at the urgent care facility. They welcomed me back easily, almost as if I had never left. But the downside was the hours. I worked mostly overnight shifts, which wrecked my sleep schedule and made any kind of social life impossible. Not that there's much of a scene out here anyway. Still, the nights themselves weren't so bad. Most shifts were slow and boring. The real problem came once I was off work. On this particular morning, I got out around 4 a.m. I was exhausted, but starving. Usually, I'd grab some quick takeout, and that night, I decided to swing by a little bagel shop that opened right at 4. They served more than bagels, sandwiches, salads, breakfast plates. So I picked up a chicken sandwich and a salad to bring home. On my way back, I realized the car was low on gas, so I stopped at a Shell station on the edge of town. It's one of the only gas stations open overnight, and even in the middle of the day, it's usually empty. The parking lot is huge, and the emptiness of it always gave me an uneasy feeling, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I went inside to pay cash, then came back out to start pumping gas. As I walked to the pump, I noticed another car pulling in, a blue sedan. A man stepped out. He looked about mid-30s, average build, wearing jeans and a jacket. I didn't think much of it at first, until he wandered away from his own car after setting the pump and approached mine. "Want to see a funny trick?" he asked. I froze, already uncomfortable. The way he said it didn't sound playful. It sounded forced, almost rehearsed. For some reason, I didn't just ignore him. Instead, I asked, "What trick?" He lifted his hands and started doing that old, childish gag where you pretend to pull your finger off with your other hand. He did it slowly, looking down at his hands, then back up at me with this strange expression, half grin, half dead stare. It was so awkward, I gave him a fake laugh, hoping he'd take the hint and go away. But he didn't. He kept doing it, over and over. Even when I looked away, he kept moving closer into my peripheral vision, performing that same stupid trick. I tried to stay calm and focus on the sound of the pump, praying for that click that would mean my tank was full. When it finally came, relief flooded me. I quickly put the nozzle back and walked fast toward the building to grab my change. When I returned, I noticed his car was still there, the pump still going, but he was gone. No sign of him anywhere. That unsettled me more than if he'd still been standing there. I hurried to my car, checked the back seat just in case, and locked the doors as soon as I got in. The drive home was only about 5 minutes, and I didn't notice any headlights behind me. I told myself he hadn't followed me, that I was safe. When I pulled into the driveway, I grabbed the hidden spare key my parents kept out front, let myself inside, and quickly tucked the key back into its spot. Once I locked the door, I felt better. My parents were asleep, the house was quiet, and all I wanted was to eat my late dinner and relax. But that peace didn't last. I was halfway through my sandwich when I heard the front door unlock and open. My heart stopped. I froze in place, chewing halted mid-bite. Slowly, I called out, "Mom? Dad?" But no answer came. The silence was crushing. I stood up, creeping toward the foyer, but no one was there. My stomach dropped. Panicked, I bolted upstairs to my parents' room and flung the door open. Both of them sat up in bed, startled by my sudden entrance. They hadn't moved from their room. They had been asleep. I stammered out what happened, saying I'd heard the door open. My dad jumped out of bed instantly, grabbed the baseball bat he kept nearby, and rushed downstairs. My mom and I followed cautiously. He checked the hiding spot for the spare key, and it was gone. My mom scolded me, even in her own fear, for not checking if anyone was around when I hid it. Meanwhile, my dad searched the entire house, room by room. He came up empty-handed each time, but I didn't feel safe. Something in my gut told me someone was still inside. When he checked my brother's old room, I stayed behind after he moved on. Maybe it was foolish curiosity, but I wanted to double-check. I looked under the bed, then opened the closet. Nothing. I sighed in relief, until I walked downstairs again and crouched to peek under the dining room table. That's when I saw him, the man from the gas station, curled up under our table, staring back at me with wide, unblinking eyes. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and my mom started screaming too. My dad charged up from the basement as fast as he could. The man crawled out from under the table, lunging at us. My dad tried to hold him back, but he was younger, stronger. It wasn't until my mom and I both jumped in, scratching, punching, hitting, that the man finally gave up and fled out the front door. We called the police immediately. They arrived quickly, but the man was gone. He still had the spare key, which terrified us. That night, the officers left a patrol car in our driveway to discourage him from coming back. My dad jammed a chair under the door handle and slept in the living room with the bat. By the next day, he changed the locks, and my parents never hid a spare key outside again. The guilt still eats at me. If I hadn't gone to that gas station, if I hadn't been careless with the key, maybe that man never would have gotten inside. But I also know he must have followed me home with his lights off because I didn't see a single car behind me. The thought of him crouched under that table, waiting for God knows what, is something that will never leave me. I'm just thankful my family and I made it out unharmed. I've always loved driving at night. There's a certain peace to it, a serenity you can't find during the day. Nothing irritates me more than being stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, surrounded by impatient drivers, leaning on their horns, inching forward just to hit the brakes again. Growing up in New York, specifically Long Island, I know traffic better than most people ever will. It's unbearable. Sometimes you can spend an hour just trying to get from one town to the next. That's why whenever I plan long trips, I always choose to drive at night. My brother lives down in Florida, and I visit him pretty often. It's a long haul, sometimes upward of 18 hours depending on when you leave, but I prefer driving. Flying feels easier, sure, but when you're staying for weeks, you don't want to rely on someone else for every ride. Having my car with me gives me freedom. On this particular trip, I had planned it down to the hour. I left my house at 2 a.m. sharp on a Thursday morning, just when the world was still asleep. My first stop was Dunkin' Donuts, where I grabbed a large coffee to prepare for the long, grueling drive ahead. By the time I made it off Long Island, it was a little past 3 a.m., and things were smooth sailing from there. Anyone who's driven from New York down to Florida knows it's simple once you're out of the city. Just take I-95 south and you'll get there eventually. Around 4 a.m., the hunger started to hit me hard. I had skipped breakfast before leaving, mostly because when you wake up that early, your brain hasn't even registered hunger yet. But a couple of hours into the trip, my stomach reminded me otherwise. I spotted a food sign off the highway and saw a Wendy's listed. That sounded good enough, so I pulled off the I-95 to track it down. The exit led me into a quiet stretch of Jersey that felt like the middle of nowhere. There were no streetlights, and the only illumination came from my own headlights cutting through the dark. Eventually, I pulled into a Wendy's parking lot. Some of the building lights were on, and I noticed one other car parked in the corner by the woods. Thinking the place was open, I drove up to the lit drive-through menu and waited. I sat there for over a minute, staring at the intercom, waiting for a voice to greet me, but silence. I even muttered a quiet, "Excuse me," just in case, but nobody answered. Curious, I grabbed my phone, looked up the hours for this Wendy's, and saw that it didn't open until 6 a.m. That's when it happened. 3 sudden knocks on my window, sharp and unexpected, almost sending me out of my seat. I turned to my right and saw a man standing there, smiling. He motioned for me to roll down the window. I hesitated, uneasy about the situation, but I cracked it open just enough to hear him. He told me the place wasn't open yet. I nodded and replied that I had just figured that out. Then he shifted the conversation. He said he was stranded. He pointed toward the lone car in the corner of the lot, claiming his battery had died. He practically begged me to help him jump-start it. I told him I didn't have jumper cables, hoping that would end it. But he quickly reassured me that he had cables in his trunk. I hesitated again, glancing at the car parked at the edge of the lot. Part of me wanted to drive off, but another part of me thought about karma. I believed that if I could help someone so easily and refused, that negativity would come back to me. Reluctantly, I agreed. He stepped aside to give me room to pull up next to his vehicle. I aligned our hoods, popped mine open, and got out to help. We connected the jumper cables, and after a minute, I told him to try starting his car. He strolled casually into the driver's seat and turned the key. Nothing. We waited another couple of minutes and tried again. Still nothing. It didn't make sense. The car had been running recently, so the battery shouldn't have been completely dead. That's when things started to feel wrong. The man stepped out, pulled out his phone, and made a call. He spoke in Spanish, his voice low, almost secretive. I don't understand Spanish, so I didn't bother trying to listen. After he hung up, he told me his friend said to give it a few more minutes and try again. I agreed, though impatience was starting to gnaw at me. I was trying to do the right thing, but something about the situation was twisting my gut. Then I heard it, the roaring engines of 2 pickup trucks flooring it from opposite sides of the Wendy's building. They came fast, one from the left, one from the right, pulling into the lot at the same time. My heart sank. Everything clicked in that instant. I whispered, "Oh no," under my breath and scrambled to unhook the jumper cables from my car. But it was too late. The trucks pulled up behind me, trapping my car in. I looked back at the man who had asked for help. He was still smiling, but now it wasn't friendly. It was sinister. His grin carried something malicious, something evil, and it froze me to the core. Without a second thought, I locked my car with the fob, turned, and sprinted into the woods behind the lot. Branches whipped against my face and shins as I ran blindly through the darkness, tripping over roots and rocks. At one point, I fell hard, but instead of getting up, I pressed myself flat to the ground, trying to make myself as small as possible. I heard voices, multiple men speaking Spanish, echoing through the woods. They were yelling, searching. My chest tightened as fear consumed me. I didn't know how many there were, and I didn't know if they were armed. All I knew was that if they found me, it wouldn't end well. The voices grew louder, then slowly began to fade. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last long. Suddenly, I heard my car alarm blaring in the distance. My heart sank again. Everything valuable I had for the trip, suitcases full of clothes, shoes, watches, bracelets, was inside that car. I crept back toward the parking lot, crouched low. When I finally had a clear view, the trucks and the man's car were gone. Only my car remained, but the rear window was shattered. I rushed over and looked inside. Every single bag was gone. My suitcases, my clothes, my accessories, easily thousands of dollars worth of belongings, wiped out in minutes. My stomach dropped, and I felt tears welling up from the sheer stress and defeat of it all. I dialed 911 and explained everything. When the police arrived, they told me they would pull the CCTV footage from the Wendy's when it opened. They took my information and said I didn't need to stay in town, that they'd keep in touch. On the drive home, the silence in the car felt heavier than ever. I was 2 hours from home, but those 2 hours felt endless. Days later, the Jersey police called me back. They told me the car in the Wendy's lot had fake license plates. The 2 trucks? No plates at all. They promised to investigate, but I knew they were only trying to give me hope. My things were gone for good. Even now, I think about that night, about how close I came to something far worse. I still believe in karma, and I hope those men eventually got what was coming to them. But the memory of that sinister smile in the dark, that will never leave me.